My name is Abigail Stevens, and I'm 32 years old. What happened at my sister's wedding is still whispered about at business dinners and charity galas. It was supposed to be a perfect evening, a grand celebration of love. Instead, it became a live-streamed disaster that shook both my family and our city's business community. Picture this, a lavish ballroom filled with over 200 elegantly dressed guests, crystal chandeliers casting golden light across marble floors. Laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of a string quartet playing softly in the background. And then, crack! The sound of my mother's hand connecting with my face echoed through the room like a gunshot. For a moment, everything froze. My diamond earring, a small gift I'd bought myself after closing a major deal, flew across the polished floor and landed 10 feet away with a delicate ping. The reason for that slap? I refused to hand over the keys to my $2.2 million penthouse, not in private, not in a family conversation, but right there, in front of 200 witnesses, during the reception speeches. Gasps filled the air. A few people stood from their chairs, unsure what to do. I stayed perfectly still, cheek burning, my pulse roaring in my ears. And then it got worse. An hour later, while the room was still buzzing from what they'd just witnessed, the doors to the ballroom swung open. In walked a man whose very presence caused a ripple of recognition through the crowd. He wasn't just any guest, he was Victor Chen, the elusive CEO of Sterling & Co., one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. My mother's scream tore through the room, high and sharp, as if she'd seen a ghost. Victor's sharp eyes scanned the chaos, then landed on me. He adjusted the cuff of his $10,000 suit and said one sentence that would change everything. But before we get there, let me take you back to the morning when I believed I was simply attending my little sister's perfect wedding, a day I thought would be about love, family, and celebration. I arrived at the Grand Lexington Hotel at exactly 8 a.m., 3 hours before the ceremony was set to begin. The hotel's ballroom was a masterpiece of luxury, white orchids cascading from towering arrangements, golden accents gleaming under the chandeliers, and rows of pristine ivory chairs set up for the ceremony. It was everything my younger sister, Emily Stevens, had dreamed of since she was a little girl. I'd contributed $50,000 to make that dream come true. No one mentioned it. Finally, my mother, Margaret Stevens, said as she spotted me walking in. Her sharp eyes scanned me from head to toe, lips pursing into a thin line of disapproval. "That dress, Abigail, couldn't you have chosen something more feminine? You look like you're about to give a corporate presentation." I smoothed my navy silk dress, which was elegant, professional, and yes, probably something I could wear to the office. "Good morning to you too, Mom." Margaret didn't respond to my greeting. Instead, she turned her gaze toward Emily, who stood across the room, glowing in her wedding gown. Now that's how a proper bride should look, just radiant. The comparison was nothing new. For 32 years, I'd been the daughter who was too ambitious, too independent, too different. Emily, on the other hand, was the princess, sweet, nurturing, exactly the kind of daughter my parents wanted to showcase to the world. Abigail, my father, Charles Stevens, called from near the bar, where he was inspecting the seating chart. "Can you check the arrangements? And don't reorganize everything like you always do." The seating chart was a disaster. Divorced couples placed together, feuding business rivals at the same table, and even a few names misspelled. My instinct was to fix it, but I bit my tongue. Pointing it out would only make me the difficult one again. "Of course, Dad," I replied evenly. "I'll make sure everything's perfect for Emily." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like ownership than affection. "Family comes first, Abigail. You'll understand that one day when you have your own family, if you ever settle down." The subtle jab landed with precision. At 32, my unmarried status was apparently a greater disappointment than any of my professional achievements. "Richard, leave her be," my Aunt Claire chimed in from nearby, though her tone was more amused than defensive. "Not everyone can be as lucky as Emily, finding true love so young." Their laughter rippled around the room. If only they knew the truth. They all believed I was just some mid-level employee at a generic company in the city. What they didn't know, because I never told them, was that I was vice president of global development at Sterling & Co., overseeing multi-million-dollar projects across 12 countries. I'd built my career quietly, strategically, not because I was ashamed of my success, but because in this family, my achievements would have been twisted into yet another reason to criticize me. Too career-focused, too competitive, too much like the son my father always wanted but never had. "So, Abigail," Uncle Henry said, during the pre-ceremony mingling, swirling his scotch like he was in a country club commercial, "how's that little apartment of yours in the city? Must be cozy." "It's a penthouse, actually," I said quietly. The group erupted in laughter. Henry nearly choked on his drink. "A penthouse? Oh, come on now, don't exaggerate." Emily floated over in her pristine gown, her voice sweet and mocking. "Last year, she claimed she was buying a Tesla. Can you imagine?" "I did buy a Tesla," I said, keeping my tone even. "It was parked outside at that very moment." No one believed me. No one ever did. "Abigail's always been ambitious," Mom said, her tone making ambitious sound like a disease. Too ambitious, really. "There's nothing wrong with modest living," Uncle Henry added with a patronizing smile. "Not everyone can afford luxury. Nothing to be ashamed of." My phone buzzed in my clutch, a notification from my building concierge about a scheduled delivery to my 4,500-square-foot penthouse on the 48th floor, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, the one I'd paid for in cash after closing a groundbreaking deal in Tokyo. I could have shown them photos. I could have pulled up the Architectural Digest feature from last month that highlighted my home. But what would that have proved? That I still wanted their validation? "You're right, Uncle Henry," I said instead, forcing a polite smile. "There's nothing wrong with living within your means." Emily's laugh tinkled like delicate glass. "See, Abigail's learning to be more realistic, finally." I turned away, walking toward the window to hide my clenched jaw. Out beyond the ballroom, the city skyline stretched before me. My penthouse towered above it all, a silent monument to 10 years of sacrifice, 80-hour work weeks, sleepless flights, and relentless ambition. Every square foot was mine, earned through sweat and skill. If I handed it over to Emily like a party favor, what would that make me? The perpetual backup plan? The family ATM? The invisible daughter, forever expected to sacrifice her happiness for theirs? As Emily basked in adoration across the room, my father's voice drifted over the crowd. "After the toast, we'll make the announcement about the penthouse." My stomach dropped. "You're sure Abigail will agree?" my mother whispered back. "She won't have a choice," Dad said, "not in front of everyone." The chill that ran through me was colder than the marble floor beneath my heels. They'd planned this. This wasn't a spontaneous act of generosity, it was a trap. And they were certain I'd walk right into it. The ceremony began at noon sharp. By then, the ballroom had been transformed into a fairy tale scene. Rows of ivory chairs filled with well-dressed guests stretched toward a raised platform adorned with cascading white orchids. Golden ribbons draped from the ceiling, catching the light like strands of sunlight. A quartet played a soft, romantic melody as Emily prepared to make her grand entrance. Everyone seemed to glow, Emily most of all. She stood at the top of the aisle, framed by 2 towering floral arches, her veil catching the light like spun sugar. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd as she began her walk toward Daniel Carter, her soon-to-be husband. Daniel's expression was pure adoration, as if Emily were a rare jewel he'd been fortunate enough to find. I sat near the front, hands folded tightly in my lap, my face carefully neutral. All around me, relatives and business associates whispered about how perfect Emily was. Such a kind soul. She'll make a wonderful wife and mother. She deserves every happiness. And not a single word about me. It was like I didn't exist. Not really. Just a placeholder, a silent figure expected to applaud from the sidelines while Emily took center stage. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if I stood up and told them the truth? Told them that Emily wasn't as sweet as she pretended to be, that behind the gracious smile was a woman who expected the world to hand her everything on a silver platter, that while she was busy planning bridal showers and spa days, I was closing multi-million-dollar international deals. But I stayed silent. not for her sake, but for mine. The ceremony continued, beautiful and pristine. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, and the crowd erupted into applause as Emily and Daniel sealed their marriage with a kiss. On the surface, it was perfect. Underneath, the trap was tightening. The ceremony began at noon sharp. By then, the ballroom had been transformed into a fairy tale scene. Rows of ivory chairs filled with well-dressed guests stretched toward a raised platform adorned with cascading white orchids. Golden ribbons draped from the ceiling, catching the light like strands of sunlight. A quartet played a soft, romantic melody as Emily prepared to make her grand entrance. Everyone seemed to glow, Emily most of all. She stood at the top of the aisle, framed by two towering floral arches, her veil catching the light like spun sugar. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd as she began her walk toward Daniel Carter, her soon-to-be husband. Daniel's expression was pure adoration, as if Emily were a rare jewel he'd been fortunate enough to find. I sat near the front, hands folded tightly in my lap, my face carefully neutral. All around me, relatives and business associates whispered about how perfect Emily was. Such a kind soul. She'll make a wonderful wife and mother. She deserves every happiness. And not a single word about me. It was like I didn't exist. Not really. Just a placeholder. A silent figure expected to applaud from the sidelines while Emily took center stage. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if I stood up and told them the truth? Told them that Emily wasn't as sweet as she pretended to be, that behind the gracious smile was a woman who expected the world to hand her everything on a silver platter, that while she was busy planning bridal showers and spa days, I was closing multi-million-dollar international deals. But I stayed silent, not for her sake, but for mine. The ceremony continued, beautiful and pristine. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, and the crowd erupted into applause as Emily and Daniel sealed their marriage with a kiss. On the surface, it was perfect. Underneath, the trap was tightening. As guests filtered out toward the reception hall, I caught a glimpse of my parents huddled together near the back of the room. They were whispering urgently, but I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were discussing. This was it, the moment they'd been planning. My mother's sharp glance landed on me for half a second. There was triumph in her eyes. She believed I'd fall in line, because I always had before. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, staring at a photo my assistant had sent that morning. It was the view from my penthouse at sunrise. Golden light flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out beneath me like a living map. My sanctuary. My proof that I had built something extraordinary all on my own. And I knew, in that moment, that I wasn't giving it up. Not to Emily, not to my parents, not to anyone. The soft buzz of the crowd returned as guests took their seats for dinner, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, a storm that was about to break in the most public way imaginable. The reception was in full swing by the time the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden shadows through the hotel's tall windows. The ballroom buzzed with laughter and chatter, champagne glasses clinking, silverware gleaming under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. I sat at my assigned table, tucked between two elderly relatives who hadn't stopped asking me why I was still single. Across the room, Emily and Daniel basked in their moment, surrounded by friends, family, and well-wishers. It should have been a night of celebration, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. The band stopped playing mid-song, and a hush fell over the room. My father, Charles Stevens, stood near the head table, holding a champagne flute in one hand and a microphone in the other. He tapped the glass gently. Ting, ting, ting. The room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his booming voice carrying easily across the space. "Before we continue toasting this beautiful union, my wife and I have a very special announcement to make." My pulse quickened. I knew what was coming. Charles smiled, his chest puffed with pride. "Family means everything to us," he said, glancing toward Emily and Daniel. "And there's nothing we wouldn't do for our children's happiness." Children. Plural. But his gaze didn't even flicker in my direction. "That's why we're thrilled to share that Abigail," he gestured grandly toward me, "has graciously agreed to gift Emily and Daniel her city penthouse as a wedding present." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered, guests gasped with delight. Emily clasped her hands over her mouth in a carefully rehearsed display of surprise, though the smug curve of her lips betrayed her. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, beaming as if they'd just won the lottery. Across the room, my extended family smiled proudly, already murmuring about how generous I was. They had no idea. Emily grabbed the microphone, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Oh my God, Abigail, are you serious? The Penthouse?" Every eye turned toward me. I took a deep breath and set down my glass. "I'm sorry," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the applause. "What?" The room went deathly quiet. Charles' smile faltered. "Your Penthouse, sweetheart, for Emily and Daniel." I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. This wasn't discussed with me. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the crowd. My mother, Margaret, swept in like a storm cloud, snatching the microphone from my father. "Don't be selfish on your sister's day," she hissed, though the microphone carried every word for the crowd to hear. "This is inappropriate," I said, keeping my tone calm and professional. "We can discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Margaret snapped. "Yes, there is. The Penthouse is my property," I said, each word deliberate, "and I have not agreed to give it to anyone." I stood frozen, my champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. Emily grabbed the microphone, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Oh my God, Abigail, are you serious? The Penthouse?" Every eye turned toward me. I took a deep breath and set down my glass. "I'm sorry," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the applause. "What?" The room went deathly quiet. Charles' smile faltered. "Your Penthouse, sweetheart, for Emily and Daniel." I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. This wasn't discussed with me. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the crowd. My mother, Margaret, swept in like a storm cloud, snatching the microphone from my father. "Don't be selfish on your sister's day," she hissed, though the microphone carried every word for the crowd to hear. "This is inappropriate," I said, keeping my tone calm and professional. "We can discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Margaret snapped. "Yes, there is. The Penthouse is my property," I said, each word deliberate, "and I have not agreed to give it to anyone." I stood frozen, my champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. Emily grabbed the microphone, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Oh my God, Abigail, are you serious? The Penthouse?" Every eye turned toward me. I took a deep breath and set down my glass. "I'm sorry," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the applause. "What?" The room went deathly quiet. Charles' smile faltered. "Your Penthouse, sweetheart, for Emily and Daniel." I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. This wasn't discussed with me. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the crowd. My mother, Margaret, swept in like a storm cloud, snatching the microphone from my father. "Don't be selfish on your sister's day," she hissed, though the microphone carried every word for the crowd to hear. "This is inappropriate," I said, keeping my tone calm and professional. "We can discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Margaret snapped. "Yes, there is. The Penthouse is my property," I said, each word deliberate, "and I have not agreed to give it to anyone." I stood frozen, my champagne glass trembling slightly in my hand. Emily grabbed the microphone, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Oh my God, Abigail, are you serious? The Penthouse?" Every eye turned toward me. I took a deep breath and set down my glass. "I'm sorry," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the applause. "What?" The room went deathly quiet. Charles' smile faltered. "Your Penthouse, sweetheart, for Emily and Daniel." I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. This wasn't discussed with me. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the crowd. My mother, Margaret, swept in like a storm cloud, snatching the microphone from my father. "Don't be selfish on your sister's day," she hissed, though the microphone carried every word for the crowd to hear. "This is inappropriate," I said, keeping my tone calm and professional. "We can discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Margaret snapped. "Yes, there is. The Penthouse is my property," I said, each word deliberate, "and I have not agreed to give it to anyone." "Yes, there is." The penthouse is my property, I said, each word deliberate, and I have not agreed to give it to anyone. Gasps erupted from the crowd. I caught snippets of their murmurs. How could she say that? So ungrateful. Poor Emily. Emily's eyes filled with perfectly timed tears. She sniffled into the microphone. Abigail, I thought you loved me. I thought you'd want me to start my marriage off right. This isn't about love, I said flatly. Your happiness does not require taking what's mine. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but before anyone could respond, Uncle Henry stood up, face red with anger. Come on, Abigail, it's family. You don't even have a family to fill that place. Emily needs it more. She's getting married, starting her life, another cousin chimed in. You're being difficult, Aunt Claire said, rolling her eyes. It's not like you can't afford another one with your big fancy job. They didn't even believe I had a big fancy job. In their minds, my success was nothing more than luck or exaggeration. That's generous of you, I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane inside me. But my finances aren't up for public discussion. Everything is about money with you, my mother spat into the microphone. Your sister's happiness should matter more than some property. If Emily's happiness depends on taking what I've built, I replied, perhaps we should examine why that is. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back actually booed. Emily's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, bitterness flashing across her face. The pressure mounted like a tidal wave. Guests shouted at me to be reasonable, their voices blending into a roar of condemnation. And then, amidst the chaos, I noticed something. At table 6, Daniel's younger brother had his phone propped up, the screen glowing with a red live indicator. My stomach dropped. The entire confrontation was being streamed on Facebook Live. Apparently, this is public entertainment now, I said, gesturing toward him. The boy fumbled, hastily ending the stream, but it was far too late. Who knew how many people had already seen this ambush unfold in real time? Margaret's face turned a deep shade of purple. She stormed toward me, the microphone clutched like a weapon. You ungrateful girl, she snarled, lowering her voice so only I could hear. You will do this. You will hand over those keys. No, I said simply. Her eyes blazed with fury. Then, with a suddenness that stunned everyone, she slapped me. The crack of her hand against my cheek reverberated through the silent ballroom. My head snapped to the side, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Gasps erupted, louder than before. My diamond earring flew off, skittering across the marble floor. I didn't move, didn't speak. Slowly, deliberately, I walked to where the earring had landed, bent down, and picked it up. The simple action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I straightened, met my mother's furious gaze, and said clearly, Congratulations, Emily. I hope your marriage brings you joy. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, chaos erupted, guests shouting, chairs scraping, Emily sobbing theatrically, my father yelling my name. But I didn't look back, not once. As the ballroom doors closed behind me, my phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Victor Chen. Saw the live stream, waiting on your call. Say the word. And just like that, the next move was mine. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing me away from the chaos of the ballroom. For a moment, I leaned against the mirrored wall, breathing deeply as my cheek throbbed where my mother's hand had struck me. I wasn't crying. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. When the doors opened on the lobby floor, I walked with measured, deliberate steps to the exit. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face, grounding me. I pulled out my phone and called the only person who could match my parents' power move for power move. Victor answered on the first ring. His deep, even voice was calm, as always. Abigail, green light, I said simply. Execute the contingency. There was a brief pause on the line. Then, understood. Give me 45 minutes. Are you safe? I touched my cheek lightly. The skin was hot and tender, but I kept my voice even. Nothing that won't heal. Just make sure you bring the shareholder agreement, the one my father never actually read. Victor chuckled, a dark sound that promised retribution. It's already in my briefcase. I hung up and climbed into the back of a waiting car. As we drove toward my penthouse, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications poured in: Facebook, Instagram, text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The live stream was spreading like wildfire. By the time I reached my penthouse, it had been shared over 10,000 times. I stood at the massive windows, staring out over the glittering city skyline. The penthouse was everything they didn't believe I had earned, everything they'd tried to take from me. Not tonight. 45 minutes later, Victor texted, "Walking in now. Richard just saw me." I smiled grimly, picturing the scene. Victor Chen was a commanding presence, tall, sharp-featured, impeccably dressed in a charcoal Armani suit. When he entered a room, people noticed. And tonight, he wasn't alone. 2 lawyers flanked him, each carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents. My phone rang. It was Victor. I answered immediately. "You're on speaker," he said smoothly. In the background, I could hear the stunned murmurs of the crowd. "Richard," Victor's voice cut through the noise like a blade, "I need to clarify something for everyone here tonight." A heavy silence fell. My colleague, Abigail Stevens, is not merely an employee at Sterling & Co. She is Vice President of Global Development, responsible for overseeing our entire Asia-Pacific division. The Tokyo expansion, the Seoul partnership, the recent multi-million-dollar Singapore deal, she built all of it. Gasps filled the ballroom. "That's impossible," my father's voice sputtered, full of disbelief. Victor didn't miss a beat. "The penthouse you attempted to seize tonight was part of Abigail's executive compensation package. It is protected by Clause 15.3 of our shareholder agreement." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Victor's tone sharpened. For those unfamiliar, Clause 15.3 activates when an executive is coerced into surrendering corporate assets under duress. And thanks to your decision to livestream this fiasco, the evidence of coercion and public humiliation is now undeniable. My mother's voice cut through the background, shrill and desperate. "You can't just— this is a family matter." Victor's response was ice cold. "The moment you involved 200 witnesses and streamed it online, you made it my business. I own 40% of your husband's company, Mrs. Stevens. I have both the legal authority and the fiduciary obligation to intervene." The crowd gasped again. My father's voice cracked. 40%? Victor ignored him. "Here's what's going to happen. Richard, Margaret, you have 48 hours to issue a public apology to Abigail, a real one, acknowledging her accomplishments and her right to her own property. You will also cease all attempts to manipulate, guilt, or coerce her, directly or indirectly." My mother screeched. "And if we don't?" "Then I'll call an emergency board meeting," Victor said smoothly. "Between my 40% and the Jensen Trust's 15%, you'll be removed as CEO before the week is out. Without my capital, your planned expansion will collapse within 6 months. Bankruptcy will follow." The background noise shifted, guests whispering, chairs scraping, the full weight of Victor's words sinking in. Emily's tearful voice rang out, trembling with outrage. "Abigail, how could you ruin my wedding like this?" I spoke for the first time since leaving the ballroom, my voice calm and steady. "I didn't ruin anything, Emily. I simply refused to give you my home. Everything else, this public mess, was Mom and Dad's choice." Victor's voice returned, cutting through Emily's sobs. "My legal team will remain here tonight to document everything. You have 48 hours, Richard. After that, I act." And with that, he hung up. I set my phone down and exhaled. For the first time all day, I felt in control. In that ballroom, my parents were scrambling, panicking, desperately trying to hold on to the image they'd built. But the truth was out now. and there was no putting it back. The following morning, I woke to a flood of notifications lighting up my phone. The live stream from the wedding had spread beyond anything I could have imagined. By 8 a.m., the video had been shared over 50,000 times, trending on 3 different social platforms. Headlines screamed across business news feeds. Prominent business family implodes during wedding livestream. Daughter publicly humiliated as parents demand $2.2 million penthouse. Victor Chen steps in to defend executive, shakes up local industry. I scrolled through messages in disbelief. Some were from strangers offering support, others from former classmates who suddenly realized I was far more than the odd, career-obsessed Stevens sister. But the most satisfying messages came from my father's clients. The first was from Jim Patterson, head of Patterson Industries. Richard, after witnessing last night's events, I am deeply concerned about continuing our partnership. We need to revisit our contract immediately. Then from David Kim, CEO of Kim Electronics. I do not conduct business with individuals who publicly humiliate their children. Contract terminated, effective immediately. And finally, from Sarah Williams of Williams Logistics. Consider our $3 million annual deal null and void. My company values integrity above all else. 3 major contracts gone before breakfast. I sipped my coffee, calm and unbothered. For years, my father had treated me like an expendable resource. Now he would finally understand that I wasn't someone he could use and discard. By noon, chaos reigned at my parents' house. Brian's family, the groom's side, had seen the video and was horrified. Brian's mother texted the family group chat, "We are leaving. This is disgraceful behavior." His father followed with a single, devastating line. "The wedding is off until we understand what kind of family we're joining." Emily blew up my phone with messages, each more desperate than the last. "You ruined my wedding. Brian's parents hate me now. They think I'm spoiled and manipulative. Fix this, Abigail, please." I didn't reply. By the afternoon, Victor sent me an update. 4 more clients have reached out with concerns. Richard is panicking. He begged me for a private meeting. I declined. I smiled at the message. For years, my father had tried and failed to get an audience with Victor Chen, never realizing that the man he wanted to impress was my mentor and ally. The irony was delicious. That evening, I changed the locks on my penthouse and handed building security a list of names permanently banned from entry. At the very top, Margaret and Charles Stevens. The doorman, James, gave me a knowing nod. "Miss Stevens," he said quietly, "I saw the video. Good for you. My daughter went through something similar. Family isn't always family, you know?" I returned his nod, gratitude softening the knot in my chest. Then I took one final step. I blocked every member of my immediate family on social media. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. The peace was immediate. Within 48 hours, the business world had chosen sides, and it wasn't even close. The narrative was clear. A successful daughter standing up against entitled, toxic parents, defended by a powerful CEO. 6 contracts evaporated from my father's company, plunging his 2-year expansion plan into ruin. Without Victor's capital, and with his reputation in tatters, he was forced to downsize dramatically. Emily's honeymoon to Bali? Cancelled. Brian's parents refused to pay a cent until the family sought professional help. The once celebrated wedding was now infamous, dissected in think pieces and late-night talk show monologues. Margaret went on a social media rampage, calling me ungrateful and corrupted by corporate greed. Her posts were quickly screenshot and shared by others with captions like, "And now we see where Abigail got her strength." Classic narcissist behavior. Emily's marriage, already fragile, began to crumble. The counseling sessions Brian's parents insisted on revealed uncomfortable truths. Emily's sense of entitlement, her inability to take responsibility, her belief that others existed solely to make her happy. 4 months later, she filed for divorce quietly and without fanfare. Meanwhile, my world was expanding. Victor called me into his office one afternoon, his expression unreadable. "The board has been watching closely," he said. "They were impressed by how you handled the situation under extreme public scrutiny." He handed me a folder. "Congratulations, Abigail. You're being promoted to Senior VP of Global Operations. I blinked, stunned. Victor, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. You earned it. The promotion came with a 40% raise and generous stock options, enough to buy another penthouse if I wanted to. Instead, I donated my raise bonus to a women's shelter dedicated to helping women escape abusive family situations. It felt like closing a painful chapter with purpose. By the end of the week, my father issued his public apology, just as Victor demanded. It was stiff, clearly written by lawyers, but it did the job. I apologized to my daughter, Abigail Stevens, for my inappropriate behavior at a recent family event. I acknowledge her professional achievements and her right to her own property. This matter is now closed. My mother, of course, refused to apologize. Her silence said more than words ever could. 6 months later, everything had changed. The scandal that began at Emily's wedding had rippled far beyond that ballroom, reshaping lives, reputations, and futures. My father's company never fully recovered. Without Victor's capital and with 6 contracts gone, he'd been forced to sell off assets and downsize dramatically. Through mutual business contacts, I heard he'd finally started therapy. Too little, too late, but at least it was a step towards self-awareness. Margaret doubled down on her victim narrative, telling anyone who would listen that I was corrupted by corporate greed and had chosen money over family. But the world had seen the video. Most people knew better. As for Emily, her marriage to Daniel barely lasted 4 months. The counseling sessions had exposed her entitlement, her inability to compromise, and her belief that other people existed solely to meet her needs. Brian's parents had been right to be concerned. Emily sent me a single text after the divorce papers were signed. I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, I got what I earned, Emily. There's a difference. Then I blocked her number. Meanwhile, my own life was thriving. The promotion to Senior VP of Global Operations had opened new doors. I was featured in Forbes 40 Under 40, the article highlighting my innovative strategies for expanding into Asian markets. Not a single word about the wedding fiasco, just my work, my vision, my success. At Sterling & Co., I found what my birth family never gave me, a chosen family. Victor and his wife invited me to Sunday dinners, where their daughters, bright, ambitious college students, looked up to me. You're proof, the older one said shyly one evening, that we don't have to shrink ourselves for anyone. Those words meant more to me than any approval my parents could have given. Now, every morning, I stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the city. This space is more than just property. It's a symbol of my freedom. I didn't just keep my home, I kept my dignity, my peace, and my boundaries. Blood might make you related, but respect makes you family. And I finally learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. The world outside glitters with endless possibilities, and for the first time in my life, I feel truly free. This view isn't just beautiful, it's proof that when everyone expected me to choose them, I chose me.